The year is 1979, and as we closed off a decade known for its paranoid thrillers and crime novel adaptations, this much-maligned adaptation of Sidney Sheldon's acclaimed novel hit the screen. The film is called Bloodline, and it stars Audrey Hepburn as Elizabeth Roth, a wealthy heiress who inherits her family's pharmaceutical company after her father's mysterious death. As she takes control of the company, Elizabeth finds herself entangled in a web of corporate betrayal, greed, and murder. The plot unfolds across glamorous European locations, with Elizabeth trying to uncover among her board of directors who might be plotting against her. Now, despite its star-studded cast and international settings, Bloodline received mostly negative reviews, with critics finding its plot convoluted and lacking the tension typical of great thrillers. The amazing cast includes James Mason, Ben Gazzara, Omar Sharif, as well as many others, and they are completely wasted in this lazy, by-the-numbers, almost laughable adaptation. This week on Back to the Balcony, we are covering 1979's Bloodline. Gene Siskel and Roger Ebert, two titans of cinematic review. Sometimes right, sometimes wrong, but always captivating. Your hosts Antonio of the Cult-Worthy Cinema Podcast and Justin Henson of the Movie Wire are here to take you back to the balcony. And I said it, man. You know what? I think this might be it. I think we did it. I think we found the worst film of this podcast's run. I will watch Galaxina 5 times back to back before I even consider watching 5 minutes of this movie again. And like we discussed offline in our text messages to each other, it might be time to go back to like more familiar territory of movies that we want to discuss instead of like this find out these hidden gems or these movies that we didn't know about that Siskel and Ebert covered, because so far I feel like we're not doing very well with this concept.
You know, I think this is going to be the only thing I disagree with you on this discussion is I'd rather watch this one more than Galaxina, because I know that I will get a good night's sleep if I put this on. It is just hypnotic how boring this movie is. And I know we had a brief discussion last week where you brought up how studios go to a meeting and they talk about how do we get people to pay attention while streaming on their couch. That's what this movie needed, is some studio meeting to just wake us up. This is like if PBS owned the rights to Murder, She Wrote in a generic kind of version. And no diss to PBS, great programming. But this was so blah, so linear, so uninteresting. I couldn't remember where I was, what I watched, or even one character name in this movie, even 2 seconds after the credits roll. I attempted 3 times, like I told you in a text message. I had to stand up to finish this movie. It was so droll.
This movie is so confusing to me because it's 1979. Think about all the films that came out just before it. I mean, like Apocalypse Now, Star Wars, all these films that feel like they are 70s movies. This felt like a TV movie from the late 60s. But here's the thing. There's like boobs in it. There's sporadic sexual assault snuff film scenes in this movie that really have nothing to do with the plot until the very end. And even that's a stretch because they don't really tie that package together. This is one of the biggest problems with me with adaptations from crime novels and thriller novels, is they're usually so in-depth on page that they get lost in translation in the film medium. It takes a lot of talent to make sure that you're tying all the loose ends together, because in my honest opinion, most of those novels have a bunch of loose ends to begin with that just get looser when they're poorly adapted into a movie. And that's what this feels like. I mean, the critics call it sleazy. It's not. It is not a sleazy movie. It's super tame with like 3 or 4 scenes of sleaziness thrown in, maybe just to kind of like get the TNA audience involved. It blew my mind too, because one of the reasons why I picked this movie is that last year, Vinegar Syndrome, a boutique Blu-ray company who is known for making high quality versions of grindhouse films, sleaze cinema, erotic cinema, garbage cinema, but making it like prestige. I can't believe they chose this to give the high end treatment to, because it's not sleazy. It just has like four useless moments of snuff film sex footage that, honestly, it's like I missed the boobs in Galaxina. I was fine with not having these scenes of nudity in this film because they didn't make sense for the plot. But neither did anything else. It is just a whirlwind of misdirectional nonsense. And here's my biggest problem, dude. That's a stacked cast. Audrey Hepburn in only her second film of the 70s, Ben Gazzara, James Mason, Omar Sharif, Romy Schneider, Michelle Phillips. These are all great people. Gert Frobe, Goldfinger himself, plays a detective. Everyone's boring. Everyone's lame. No one cares about their performance in this movie. And it's obvious. This is such a disaster. I don't want to watch it again, but I do want to like dive deeper into why these people made it. Were they all like being blackmailed or something? Like, how did this even get started?
I will give the movie a little bit of credit, and it's not good credit, is this movie made boobs uninteresting to me that I didn't even care. When those scenes came on, I didn't know why they were put in. I don't know where it was going. And by the end of by the time the credits rolled, I still don't know what the hell that was all about. It is so slow paced that even at points, I was inserting my own subplots into it to distract me from this movie. And I think that's why I have no idea exactly why some of the things that were inserted, because I had a better movie in my head playing just to entertain me. But when it comes to the mystery element of it, it really does, I want to say, try to overcomplicate itself, but it's so simplistic. It tries to overcomplicate it, but it slows the pacing down where everybody's talking at the same tone, like we're talking at a line delivery table for the first time. There is no pacing to the delivery in any of the characters. And when you become that linear, we just don't care. There is no end game to, you can have dancing monkeys on the screen for 5 minutes, but that's still not going to entertain me. You have to have some thrills, some music to build tension. You have to have some characters do something interesting. There is nothing interesting that happens, and the music in the background plays like a lullaby that matches the
Mm.
performances that you just kind of want to just take about 5 to 6 shots of espresso just to follow along. This is so droll and boring that it isn't necessarily complicated, but it makes itself complicated.
Well, I'm thinking that like maybe the novel was complicated in a good way. Like I feel like the novel truly tried to do like an Agatha Christie thing where you do have your lineup of suspects. For example, Ben Gazzara playing essentially what would be the John Cassavetes character, right? He's like the love interest, but do we trust him? Is he a good guy? Is he a bad guy? You got James Mason in there, who's like the lovable uncle. He couldn't be the bad guy. Omar Sharif is in the movie for like 5 minutes, and his story means absolutely nothing. Like he's being blackmailed to try and get the family fortune. Nothing ever comes of it. His character literally just disappears. And then you got Romy Schneider, who's like one of my favorite actresses from the European crime cinema, the Swimming Pool, especially, just like one of the great movies of the 60s. She was married to Alain Delon for a while. She should be the femme fatale of this movie. She's barely in it. And then Michelle Phillips from the Mamas and the Papas, Wilson Phillips' mom, essentially. She's great in Valentino. She was an icon of the 60s folk music movement. She plays like this kind of flippant gambling addict who's run up all these debts in the casino. Her husband's James Mason, and we feel sorry for him because he has all these debts of hers that he has to pay. That's supposed to be a main driving point of the movie that's supposed to help the climax. It doesn't. She just disappears. We literally get no closure on any of these people. You know, essentially, she gets mobbed up a little bit and then she's gone. Nothing ever comes out of it. And so I think that's the biggest problem with this movie is like, if all of those loose ends are tied together in the novel, and I assume they were because Sidney Sheldon was paid $1.25 million for the treatment of this movie in 1979. That was a lot of money back then for a screen treatment. So the studio must have seen something. It was a big hit of a novel of that era, but to not make any sense or have any loose ends tied up in the film, and he worked on the screenplay. So it makes me feel like there must have been some kind of turmoil behind the scenes where he had a lot of ideas taken away from him by the other people writing the screenplay. And it probably just made the whole story collapse because it makes no sense. But the biggest tragedy for me is Audrey Hepburn's performance and her character. I mean, this is an icon, obviously. Romantic comedies aside, we all love Audrey Hepburn romantic comedies, but I especially love the Audrey Hepburn thrillers or dramas. Children's Hour with Shirley MacLaine, Charade, and Wait Until Dark, where she plays the blind woman assaulted by the heroin smugglers in her apartment. Like, that's one of the best thrillers of all time. Where was that energy? Because she seems so unenthused, uninterested, and unbothered by the fact that her father and people around her are dying. And all she does is sit down and smoke a cigarette anytime there's like a moment of tragedy. I'm like, she is so phoning this in. So either she didn't care or that's what the director told her to do. And either way, it's just a tragedy to see her in this movie.
It's a little bit of both because I think Audrey Hepburn's agent heard mystery, pharmaceutical mystery thriller, and this just rings all the bells of an adaptation that could be big at the box office. And I think what it boils down to, even though the dialogue in the adaptation we can tell is overspoken, it's not interesting, and it wasn't adapted well. But at the same time, I think this is a pure direction problem because if you go through half of shooting and realize there is no energy and you're falling asleep in the director's chair trying to direct these people, these are issues with the movie that just doesn't prolong. I can't picture a director looking at the energy on set, looking at the performances that all seem sewn together. They all seem the same and saying, this is great. And even in post-production, listening to the music alongside of it, it's not going to sound or feel good. So to me, I think this wholeheartedly is a direction problem by Terrence Young, where we don't really have that fear element, that danger element. There's no element, period, in this movie to make us feel something on what's going on screen. So I think this is a little mix of a production nightmare that Young didn't have that smart friend saying, hey, this sucks. This is boring. This is something that really, I'm falling asleep watching Audrey Hepburn. If you're a filmmaker and you don't get that energy, that seduction, that sexiness that Audrey Hepburn built her career on, then you're doing something wrong. So to me, Young owns this issue with this film.
Which blows my mind because Terrence Young essentially is the man that gave us James Bond. He directed the first 3 James Bond movies with Sean Connery, and he directed Wait Until Dark, the movie that this should have been, right? He's already directed her in that type of performance. He also did some great Charles Bronson movies. He did Cold Sweat. He did The Valachi Papers. He did Red Sun. All those movies are very high-tension crime thrillers with a lot of grit and a lot of energy. So maybe this just wasn't the right screenplay for him because none of that is in there. And at first I was kind of enthused. I'm like, all right, the movie starts with a glacier climbing accident, right? I'm like, okay, glacier climbing, I'm in. And then it's all corporate nonsense. It's all boardroom meetings. It's all inheritance arguments between squabbling members, and there's not even any fun there. It's not like Knives Out where you've got a bunch of people arguing over the will and the inheritance. It's people talking through lawyers and cops, or not even like speaking with each other. It's all through phone call or taped conversation. Like there's no energy there. The part that lost me on this movie though, bro, is when Gert Frobe shows up as the inspector of this case. First of all, he's using his real accent, the accent that he was famously dubbed over for in Goldfinger. And I see why they dubbed him over. You can't understand a goddamn thing this guy says. So what do? They have a talking police computer do all of the dialogue essentially for him. So when he'll come into the office to explain his case, instead of having a conversation, he brings everyone back to the police station and a computer voice tells them what is going on with the case. It is your very 60s, 70s sci-fi computer voice saying, the suspect killed the person with a knife and blah, 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 and that. And that's how we are learning so much exposition that we're supposed to retain for this movie through this weird computer voice and this weird, like, poppy synth music in the background while he's there. It made no sense at all. And as I was watching these scenes, I knew I was in trouble. I knew this movie was in trouble. And that's when I first checked, like, how much time was left. I'm like, oh, dear God, there's still like 55 minutes left of this movie. Whew.
You know, I'm glad you brought that scene up, because that scene when he's talking to the computer really challenged my surround sound, where at one point I had to switch it to the TV speakers because even my surround sound, I couldn't decipher what this computer was saying. But even before that, I had hopes for this. When Gert comes in as the inspector with the rope in the boardroom, I'm like, this is going to be an Agatha Christie
Right.
showdown. This is going to be the introduction of who done it, and the suspects are going to be presented. But all he does is nod at the evidence. He doesn't speak. And it's like the most awkward moment. But at the same time, that is the only moment that enticed me to follow along with this movie, where he presents this rope that's been shot, but we don't know how he knows that. There's no deciphering of, this is what I found in my investigation of how he was killed. It's just nodding. So there's no real brilliance or like edge to these, what these people are saying. Even the investigator has to use props and nods just to tell us, follow along, it will be worth it in the climax, I promise. But we don't get that mystery element. I mean, this year we had Black Bag. That was a fantastic, stylish thriller that's along the same lines. That's really lengthy dialogue, but it adds some sexiness to it. It adds some wonder to it. This is something, given the Bond films and a lot of spy thrillers, they should have known better, that you need an edge to push us along, to dangle the mystery ahead of us, to give some characters some motives that isn't the same as everybody else. We need some clues, and our critics are going to speak to it, and I 100% agree, but we need something to entice us to follow along with these characters, and we get nothing other than just laughable scene after laughable scene. And honestly, by the time we get to those scenes, I'm so tired, I don't even want to laugh at these scenes.
You know, so I want to go back to the sex stuff for a second, because I like I said, I haven't read the novel. I went back and read the synopsis of the novel, which is similar to the movie, but there's a lot more of like these snuff film sex crimes in the novel that kind of follow a separate story that leads us to the end. So it's like a parallel story between this mystery sex killer who's making these snuff films and the pharmaceutical company now run by Audrey Hepburn. And how the two are tied together is when they find these snuff films, they realize that they were shot on film stock that was owned by the pharmaceutical company. That's how they tie these two things together. So that's the only connection that we have until the end. They don't drop enough red herring clues throughout the movie to even make us suspect that anybody in the list of suspects are part of these sexual stuff films. We're so focused on who killed her dad and who's killing the people around her that these snuff film deaths feel like something completely different. And in my opinion, because I don't want to spoil the ending, the person who ends up being the killer, I think the filmmaker and maybe the actor himself were so concerned about the person's legacy and how people are going to perceive him as being a sexual deviant that they just don't follow through with that part of the novel, which makes it so confusing. Because by the time we find out who the villain actually is, they don't make enough connection of him being a sexual deviant to be afraid of that whole plot point. So what makes that even weirder is that there was a television edit of this film that was actually 20 minutes longer than this, but they took out the entire plot of the sexual snuff film killer. They took all of that stuff out. So how do you take all of that out and then make all of the boardroom stuff longer and not tie the sex kills with the pharmaceutical inheritance shit? Like, it blows my mind how that was possible and how much this movie falls apart, because I feel if this was made correctly, they would have gone deeper into the sexual deviancy of the killer, like what Peeping Tom did, right? Or Buffalo Bill, even in Silence of the Lambs. Like, if you follow the depravity of your villain, it makes much satisfying ending when that film comes to an end and that villain's taken out. But in this one, we just don't care because we don't even really get that connection. It's all through dialogue, not through performance, and not through a visual cue that this guy's actually a sicko. He's not just trying to get the inheritance. That really sucked for me with this movie.
You're not going to ruin the ending for anybody because nobody's going to stay awake enough to actually see the climax. But what this needed is something, I think, and I'm going to go back to kind of the 8mm disgusting film, but
Right.
at the same time, what it did do well is the transitions between snuff film and crime. So that's what I think is missing here is the bridge. It's missing the bridge of the breadcrumbs of connecting the dots. It's even missing transitions, appropriate transitions between plot and the scenes we get those killings. So there's nothing in between the killings and what happens after the killings to really tie it in together. They just almost feel thrown in just to give the impression of sexiness, to give the impression of vulgarness, of trash, of just feeling dirty, but it really doesn't explain itself to justify it. And I think that would have been a more catapult for this movie to really have scenes inserted that's appropriate to really add that sense of danger. If you're going to add that kind of subject matter into a film like this, then you need to have something to really bridge the main plot or to make it rewarding in the climax. But the climax goes so quick, and thank God it does, but it goes so quick that it's not rewarding. It's just kind of, this is the explanation, this is what happens, and credits roll. So there's no real reward to this movie. There's no real climax, I would say. It just kind of ends.
It does, yeah, and it ends terribly. And like, I had to read through the synopsis of what the ending actually was because I think they were so afraid to go that far into that territory. And we talked about this before, a film in the 70s, talked about it with Angel. I've talked about it before in my other podcast with Death Wish 2 and 1, like not necessarily just rape revenge movies, but movies where there's like sexual assault that leads to some kind of vigilante execution of people. I feel like they really try to steer away from that. So when the biggest clues are given that these women in these snuff films are killed by being strangled with a red ribbon, they never talk about that in any of the conversations with Audrey Hepburn, in any of the conversations with the board. It's like it's a completely different case. So when the red ribbon appears at the end of the film, if you literally weren't paying attention or read the synopsis, you would not understand the relevance of that token, of that thing that is supposed to be the lead to the climax, the aha moment. It's not there. We're robbed of it because they never set it up to begin with. So yes, the editing, the directing, the screenwriting, everything in this movie just fails it completely. And you can tell that the stars know they're in a dog because they have zero energy. James Mason's one of the best actors of his generation. I love James Mason in everything, even bad movies. But he is so just dull here. Almost like he's, like you said, like table read. This is like he's just doing his blocking and just saying his lines. There's no energy behind it. And he's supposed to be a very important character.
Well, I think this one, a good scene that we have to show how scared Terrence Young was of the material and even some of the vulgarness to it. is when we have one of the victims being pulled out of the boat, completely naked, dead. Any other director almost would zoom in and bring the audience, the viewer in to see this how impactful
Right.
and how vulgar this death was.
The
But Young
carnage.
stay the carnage of it. And Young stays completely zoomed out, like there's nothing to see here. So you can almost tell that this material he was almost scared of. In 1979, he was scared of showing too much of the taboo, too much of the dirtiness, the trashiness of it. But that's what this movie needed is something to bring the audience in to really make us feel anything, something,
Right.
just get us enticed to it. And he was scared of it.
And like, maybe that's just to the respect of Audrey Hepburn. Like maybe they really thought that Audrey Hepburn can't be in too trashy of a movie. So it can't be like Dirty Harry with all of the naked dead bodies. It can't be like Death Wish. It can't be like that. So it's almost like they were trying to have some prestige and respectability to a film that if you read the synopsis, if you watch a trailer, and if you read the synopsis of the novel, it's a down and dirty story with down and dirty deeds, and they clean it up for the screen, and it just doesn't work. But you know what? What gives me comfort, Justin, is that we were not the only two that thought this was the worst movie we've had on the show so far. Our critics felt very similar.
Now, the new movie Bloodline is trashy too, but that's all it is. Audrey Hepburn plays the heiress to a billion-dollar pharmaceutical company. Her father has just been murdered. She's had a threat on her life. And during her wedding reception, she sends for a Swiss detective who's been investigating her father's death. The film turns out to be a simple guessing game of which one of Audrey Hepburn's relatives is trying to kill her. All of the suspects have the same motive, money. Now, to add spice to this guessing game, which gets awful dreary at times, the film throws in a few disgusting scenes of naked women being strangled. Bloodline is really sleazy. It's surprising to see Audrey Hepburn in a picture like this, which is only her second film in the 70s. With Audrey Hepburn, you might expect Bloodline to be excellent trash. All it is, though, is trashy.
You know, it's interesting. I agree with him, but I said already, like, I don't feel that this film is overtly sleazy. I feel it's not sleazy enough. Those sleazy moments in the movie, the 3 or 4 of them, which he refers to, they are 30 seconds long, and they're not super depraved. I mean, yes, they are in poor taste, but they don't bring the film to like a level of sleaziness that I think he's referring to. Like I said, I feel like the film is actually quite timid, maybe too timid up to that point. So it almost makes me feel like he took a movie that he already hated and just added more hate to the scenes that really didn't belong in there, in his opinion. My personal grindhouse trashy opinion says that it needed more of those scenes. It needed to really double down on how depraved the killer was, so the climax is more satisfactory and not so timid and, like you said, short-winded, where it's like, oh, the end, you know?
Well, I don't know. I'm torn with Gene on his because I agree, but I think it needs more context because when we have scenes in cinema where it doesn't go far enough to your point, and both of our points actually, it can come across trashy because it doesn't give us a feeling. It doesn't give us anything to work with. And we just get the interpretation they're throwing it in to throw it in. And if I'm watching a movie and if I don't have a clear intent of why something's on screen that has nudity, a vulgar death, and something that's just gross when it comes to sexual violence, then I will call it trashy. And I think that's what's really missing here. And Gene's connecting the dots is there's no emotional reaction. There's no real point to it. And that's what we kind of consider trash. That can be one point of it. But at the same time, it's the end of the 70s where you take anything with female death and a death in a sexual nature and it feels thrown in, it's going to look kind of trashy. And Gene's point of view that we've seen from reviews in the past with him is there's really nothing good that can come from a female death. And he has a strong point on that, unless it's done in a genuine, emotional way. That's not what Gene wants here.
Yeah, I agree with you on that part. I think that I honestly believe that the source material was probably very trashy and it got cleaned up for the screen. It'd be like if, let's just say as an example, let's say Basic Instinct. if that version of the movie was a novel, but then the film version we got had literally no sex scenes in it whatsoever, it takes away from what makes that movie work. And that's what this feels like. I feel like the novel is depraved. If you look at the book cover, it's depraved. It's the girl's got her neck tied with a ribbon. And the same with the actual original poster of this. It's a girl with her neck tied with a ribbon, like she's just been strangled to death with it. That's not what the movie's about. That's literally like a minute and a half worth of footage committed to that plot point. Everything else is put aside. And it makes me laugh because, Vinegar Syndrome is famous for people blind buying stuff. You subscribe to their package and they just send you these Blu-rays throughout the year. And I could only imagine someone who's thinking they're going to get like a real depraved film. Oh, this movie's called Bloodline. Oh, it's got a girl with like a red ribbon tied around her neck. It's going to be fucking awesome. And then they sit through the hour and 20 something minutes of this movie like you and I did of like, what? like you said earlier, this really is like a TV soap opera. That's what it feels like.
Well, we even get, even in the opening credits, something that seems like a Bond opening, something that just
it feels like a Bond opening for sure. Yeah.
Just something seductive. We have the red themed ribbon. We have the girl that's almost giving her last breath. We think that this is going to be a very risque movie, and the credits go on way too long, which will be more of a theme of the movie than the actual credits actually represent. So I think this is almost, we're expecting high expectations going into it. And I think that's what our critics really went into. You have Hepburn alongside an all-star cast. You have the Bond director. Everything was set to scene to really have people anticipate a great movie, a great thriller. And we don't get even close to that. And that's where I think our two critics are really going to have an even bigger problem, and rightfully so, because it wasn't a good movie.
Oh, Roger doubles down on it.
I'll go even further than that, Gene. As far as I'm concerned, this is the worst major movie of 1979.
What's so bad?
I was totally appalled. It denies us even the simple pleasure of trying to figure out for ourselves who might be the person who's after her. I mean, even in an Agatha Christie thriller, you have little clues and false leads, and you can sit there and so forth. Here, the suspects simply stand around suspecting each other, and then, as you mentioned, you have that nauseating business of the strangulations every Thursday.
That's worth repeating.
So, 100%. This movie gives you no fun in figuring out who the killer is. That's the whole point of a good mystery movie. Is even like in bad mystery movies, they always give you red herrings and false flags for you to be like, oh, it's got to be that guy. Oh, no, it's got to be that guy. Oh, no, it's got to be that guy. They don't do that any of that. If anything, the person who I thought it was kind of halfway through the movie was the wife with the gambling debts who gets her kneecaps nailed to the floor. I was thinking that that's who the killer was because she's the one that wanted the money the most. It wasn't her, but that's literally the only person that I'm like, they're really kind of pointing it towards this girl, Michelle Phillips. Maybe she's the killer because everyone else is just so boring and they don't do anything to give the story away. And maybe like Terrence Young's just not good at mysteries. Maybe he's good at suspense and thrillers, but maybe he's just not good at like giving actors the physical cues to give us the idea that they might be guilty. None of that's there. Any evidence we have against anybody is completely circumstantial, and the goddamn computer tells us so.
I don't even know what genre this movie is, and I don't care to even look at. So, but I love a good mystery. If there's mystery in the synopsis, if there's mystery in the IMDb profile, I have my phone notepad, I have a piece of paper. I'm looking for little hints along the way, and I couldn't care less on anything here. And today I watched it for the third time, and I even brought out my notepad when the inspector came out at the boardroom table saying, I am committed. No matter how slow everybody talks, I'm going to nitpick everything that comes out of their mouth. And after about 30 minutes, I was getting nothing, and I just gave up. It takes and sucks the fun out of what this movie could have been. It's not seductive, it's not sexy, it's not appealing, and it's not a mystery. So to kind of our critics' point, that I don't even know why this movie was made and what the direction it was trying to, what the audience it was intended for. Because to me, there is no entertainment value to this film.
Well, okay, and I'm glad you kind of mentioned that because it made me think about something. I feel like, again, I haven't read the novel, I just read the synopsis, but the synopsis is very rudimentary, right? But you've got this kind of business-minded, powerful, yet somewhat unattached female lead, the heroine, so to speak. I feel like in the novel, there has to have been some kind of sexual chemistry between her and the Ben Gazzara character because they do get married for the sake of, saving the company. I feel like the biggest issue is like there is no sexual chemistry between them. I feel in the novel there was probably a lot. I know for a fact the novel was written for a character like 20 years younger than Audrey Hepburn, and they kind of adjusted the script to fit her age range for this movie because that's what I feel this movie is missing. If there was, let's say, sexual chemistry and politics, because there's a lot of sexual politics going on behind the scenes of like, oh, the woman's going to run the biggest pharmaceutical company in the world. Can't she even do it kind of thing? Like, I feel like she should be like a Beth Dutton type character, right? She needs to be like a strong, very sexual, passionate person. That's what I feel the character is supposed to be. But she plays it as just a bored, uninterested, don't even bother me type character. And there's a scene where she gets jealous of Ben Gazzara for having like a sexual past with these girls at this bar. And she's all uppity and snooty about it. And he's like, hey, I used to live, what do you get mad at me for? Our marriage is fake anyway. I feel that makes no sense because there's no sexual chemistry between the two of them to begin with. So why is she getting so upset? There's subtext missing here that I feel would have made a much better movie if they just would have been a little bit more daring and said, yeah, let's get dirty with this.
This has the chemistry between these two as mom and dad trying to have sex and hoping the kids don't wake up because there is a scene where they kind of get out of a car and then they kind of hint at a sexual relationship by just the camera panning to the hotel. I'm like, how unattractive is that in a movie?
Well, you're going to do that, and then you're going to show us a girl strangled to death with her tits out while a dude's filming it. Like, you've got your priorities in a jumble.
I'm like, this is the most tainted PG movie ever. I'm like, every element is just go further. But it's like, I don't know. I can bash this movie on how it can't go further for about an hour and a half, but it just proves itself over and over and over again that it is just scared of the material and the wrong people were in place. So this one was just a complete misfire on multiple accounts. But just my overall one word for this movie is just safe.
Yeah, safe. So they finish it up with this little retort.
The blue, about every 30 minutes, we see a naked woman strangled in luscious detail. This picture can only be after thugs in the audience. I mean,
who did they think they were making the picture for? I mean, Audrey Hepburn fans who come to see The Wardrobe are going to be appalled by the violence.
Yes.
No violent movie fan would ever go to a movie like this, I hope. They're going to be disappointed too. Too much Audrey Hepburn. It's a toss-up as to which audience will hate the movie more.
Yeah, that's pretty well put.
Terrible. Let's look at a better movie. I mean, let's give ourselves a break. Huh?
He is totally right. Like, the audience, so let's say how much we loved the movie Angel, and we praised it in our episode. And Roger loved it too, because he's like, Angel's not trash. Angel's working at a whole different level. That crowd would be so disappointed walking into this film and realizing that it's all about Audrey Hepburn trying to save her father's company and solve his murder, and oh no, my husband might be the killer, with a few sex scenes. Like, it's boring. There's nothing to it to make it exciting for a younger crowd. And then if my mom watched this movie, oh, I love Audrey Hepburn. What's up with these weird sex scenes? Like, it doesn't have a good audience. And anyone that is on Vinegar Syndromes, because I went and read the reviews, people are giving 5 stars. You're full of shit. You're a poser. You're lying, and you're lying to yourself. You just don't like saying bad things about movies from Vinegar Syndrome. That's my opinion.
Well, I love the fact that Roger states that who would see this garbage? Who would see this kind of movie? This is the man who gave 3 stars to 8mm. So this one, compared to most movies that we'll see in the 80s, 90s to even the early 2000s. This was nothing. But again, I go back to my point is you can't have a vision without intent. You can't have that vulgarity without an outcome. And that's what I think they're not explaining in context of why this is trashy.
Yeah.
This is the main reason. And this is what really pisses them off is the fact that it doesn't really go anywhere. And that's what makes it bad trash, not good trash. So I think to an extent, Roger is not giving context to why this movie isn't as good as he wanted it to be is because it just doesn't have any direction or intent.
So in his review that he wrote for the paper, he has a great little quip that he doesn't say on the show, but he says, after 6 months, a week, and 2 days of suspense, we can now relax. The worst movie of 1979 is opened. See Sidney Sheldon's Bloodline and weep for cinema. I think that's fantastic. Weep for cinema. I mean, okay, so let's just go ahead and get to our critics' reviews. I mean, Gene, obviously, we knew he wasn't going to like this movie. I think that you're right, where you should have expected more from him, other than just the very broad generalization of what this movie actually is, and the things that he obviously doesn't like, which is, in this case, unnecessary sex scenes. And they feel unnecessary because I feel like the movie was supposed to be more of that. And when you sanitize it and throw those in there, they are unnecessary. So I can't really disagree with him too much. I do think he should have gone harder in the paint. I'll give him a C, even though I know he hated the movie as much as we did. I agree with you. Could have been framed more constructively.
And that's what makes it really hard is we both agree that the critics are right. It is not a good movie, and I will never watch this movie again, and I as far away from this movie as I can go. But I think when it comes to Roger, what's really missing is really giving some context. And I know it's hard, especially in 1979, to give it more attention to why it's called trash or why they visualize it as trash. It's hard to verbalize that in a 2-minute snippet. But I think he nails the point that it is the worst movie and it deters people from seeing it. But at the same time, it deserved a little bit more context of why it was bad and why it was trash is because it didn't go far enough. And this is one that I think Roger really doesn't express his true emotions other than hatred for the movie of just calling it not good. There should have been something in between the lines to really push his review further. So it's a bare miss. I think he nailed the point, but I'm going to give him 2.5 stars.
Okay. I mean, I'm going to have to go back and look at the movies of 1979 again, but this is definitely my least favorite movie that we've covered on the show so far. So I can't see how a mainstream movie, at least, could be worse than this in 1979. We'll have to go back and look at that. But he hated it so much to use that phrase twice, once in his written work and once on the show. It means that this movie really hurt him. So yeah, I agree. This movie was terrible. So let's hope that next week's is better. So next week, Justin is bringing to the show 1981's The Amateur, starring John Savage and Christopher Plummer. So yeah, 2 John Savage movies not too far apart from each other. And if you didn't know, this is the original version of the film that's out in theaters right now, starring Rami Malek, which you thought was okay, thriller, whatever. So we'll see if this one holds up better.
Fingers crossed, because the new version is just okay. So I haven't seen the original, so I'm very curious. And I haven't watched the Siskel and Ebert review. So I'm really hopeful that the original stays true to most remakes, that the original is going to be better than the remake.
Yeah, I wouldn't expect any flashbang action. I've watched part of it before. What I remember I kind of liked, but it's also very similar to the Richard Chamberlain version of The Bourne Identity, right? Which was more of like a drama than an action thriller that we're known for the Matt Damon movies. Same storyline, very different energy, and I think that's what we're going to experience when we go back and watch that one. So that'll be our episode next week. So everyone, thank you for watching, listening. Please like, review, rate 5 stars to Back to the Balcony on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, wherever you listen to podcasts. Give us a good review on YouTube. Follow us, subscribe, all that good stuff. You can find me and my other show, The Cult-Worthy Cinema Podcast, at thecultworthy.com. And you can find my friend Justin's show at
TheMovieWire.com.
All right, Justin, I'll see you next week.
See you next week.